Hi and welcome to today's meetup, Scalable, Secure Micro Frontends. My name is Eric Forslid and I will guide you through the event tonight. As you can see, I have company with me here today. But before we talk more to you, Max, I would just like to say that I work here at Forefront at our tech division, where I'm in charge for one of our business units that focus on system development. And right now, do I only have company from you, Max? But don't worry, guys. The speakers will join the panel later for a lot of engaging discussions. Now, welcome, Max. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. My name is Max Olsson. I'm in charge of systems development in Stockholm at Forefront. And I also do a bit of marketing work together with Eric. So this is good fun to be here tonight with you. That's basically the short of it for me, Eric.
Yes, thanks. And great to have you here. And before we start the sessions, we would like to give a short presentation of Forefront. So if we get some slides, great. Forefront is a consultant agency that was established here in Stockholm in 2008. And today we are about 400 employees spread over 6 local offices. And today we organized in 3 areas. We have our channels division, which main focus is design and user experience related stuff. And then we have management, which main offer is business agility and enterprise and business architecture. And then we have technology, of course, which mostly stands for the presence here tonight. And Max, could you please give us some more information about technology?
Sure, I would love to do that. So, technology obviously involves a lot of technologies. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple of them. And mostly we'll be focusing on the front-end technologies and React in particular and related frameworks to that. And also we're going to talk a bit about integration in the form of API management and how we implement that. So that's going to be good fun. And we're going to also look at the perspective of what is the value we can derive from these technologies and what capabilities can we build. So what we are really passionate about is teamwork and innovation. And in our context, it means building killer apps, of course. That's what everybody wants for their customers. This is sometimes easy to conceptualize in terms of what we would like to happen. But once we go into reality, we run into a couple of roadblocks. And they could usually be that we have a lot of dependencies to various systems and parts of the organization. And that's basically the challenge that we as Forefront try to address when we work with our customers. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how we make reusable, scalable, and secure front ends, of course. And then we're also going to talk a bit about how we can utilize APIs to make these deliveries happen in an efficient way. So that's basically how we implement teamwork and innovation in this context tonight. So team execution, that's what we do at Forefront. And usually this covers quite a wide scope. We need to have an alignment with the vision in terms of the senior management and work with that. We also need to do good business architecture and have change management and product ownership that works well. And what we particularly focus on and what we'll be talking about tonight is how we build development teams and actually get value from that work. So that's basically how our Forefront fits into this agenda. So we also have a couple of partners that we're very proud to have with us tonight. One of them is Coop. Coop has many different services and offerings. The ones that are most well known, of course, is the grocery services and the store retail of groceries that we have available in Sweden. Forefront, of course, we do digital transformation in various ways. And Telia is a very large operator player in the Nordics. And so this is an interesting combination, we think. So, Eric, can you tell us a bit about the agenda? We're all ready to rumble here.
Yes, of course, I'll do that. First out will be Jesper, who will share his experience from Trygghetsrådet, where he will talk about scaling app development with micro frontends. and he will be followed by Mikael and Gustav, who will talk about unlocking the API economy with the API Garden at Telia. And then will Amar and Oscar wrap up and talk about how they were joining a team that launched a banking front-end in 6 months.
And in between each of these, we'll have the panel discussion. Of course, it'll be interactive. Hopefully, it'll be fun. We'll do a couple of jokes, I hope. Eric, by the way, why was the JavaScript developer so introverted?
I have no idea. Please tell us.
He didn't know how to express himself. So, yeah. Maybe you can tell us a bit about how this all works so it's easy to participate.
Yes, we have a slide for that on how we play tonight. So, for those of you who have watched our 2 previous online meetups, you know the game rules by now, but for the rest of you, here is a short recap. As Max mentioned, the presentations are pre-recorded and will be played as playback. And speakers are available in some format for Q&A between the sessions. 2 of the speakers are joining us here in the studio panel tonight, and the rest of the speakers are watching the stream and are happy to answer your questions directly from the comments field. So I would just like to say again, shoot as many questions as you have directly in the comments field at YouTube, and we will gather them up after each session and address them here in the studio panel in a live manner. Lastly, we also really believe in the power of innovation and are happy to share our thoughts on a more personal level as well. So if anybody is interested in any of the materials from the presentations tonight, you can just send me an email at eric.forslid@forefront.se and I will send that to you. We can also arrange individual sessions afterwards or at another time if anybody is interested in that. But now, we are almost there, Max. Do you have anything to add, or are you just as excited as I am to get started?
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We're looking forward to it. Let's go.
Yes, and first out is Jesper, who will talk about scaling app development with Micro Frontends.
Hello, and welcome to this presentation on Micro Frontends. So, who am I? My name is Jesper Brännström, and I work as an architect and a tech lead at Forefront Consulting. And we've implemented this pattern at Trygghetsrådet. And with me, I've had a team of veritable superheroes and we've together come all this way. So I'll try to guide you on our journey that we've come on so far. But what challenges led us here? I mean, you don't usually start with a solution. We've actually had a number of issues that led us to this sort of solution to our problem. And so yesterday, the different initiatives looked like this. We had multiple parallel initiatives that were looked at as platforms. But we've come to the conclusion that it's going to look a little bit more like this in the future. So instead of separate applications, we are actually building one big application. And all of these small different initiatives must work together. And they're going to occupy the same space. And so this is the way it's been looking so far. These different colors represent different applications. And you can see that they actually have different shapes. And so our goal is to make the user experience more consistent and more coherent. And also somehow to reach development scalability when we have these different initiatives where they're going to spread out over time in terms of complexity. And so how can we actually make that into one, a more simple way to develop? And so our goal is to make something a little bit more like this instead. So it's still going to be different applications developed by different teams, but it's going to be more consistent from the user's perspective. And so this is probably something that you've seen a lot in big development organizations. When you have different teams, oftentimes different teams implement the same thing over and over again. It may be things like login or different toasters or any kind of feature really. And so we want to be able to avoid implementing the same thing over and over again. And so the thought here is if we can implement something systematically, then we can also change it systematically. And so the base focus is to create customer value instead of focusing on these different technical initiatives. We also have another issue, and this is not actually specific to Micro Frontends per se, but it's a problem that we've had at this customer. And so we're using EpiServer, a CMS system. And the goal is to make this somehow a little bit more easier for the users, for the editors. And so this image here on the left is perhaps a little bit difficult to understand. We need to somehow make it easy to use. And also there's a goal to widely increase the number of users over time to scale to the millions rather than the tens of thousands. And so we've usually had the normal perspective of either being logged in or logged out. But we're starting to look at this more like a scale, where you may access some features depending on where you are in a flow, rather than just being locked out of all of it. And so viewing this more like a scale means we need to change on how the login flow is used and implemented across the different applications. And if we implement this once, again, we can change it in the same way all over the place. But what are micro frontends? I mean, what have we been talking about here? So briefly, you can look at it as when an application is composed of parts owned by different teams. And most importantly, these teams are independent, autonomous, and they work end to end. And we'll get back to this in a few minutes. But what alternatives are there? I mean, there are always different ways of implementing something. And so let's have a brief look at the different ways we could approach this before we go on and look at our approach as to how we did this. So first out, and perhaps the easiest solution, is to simply link different applications together. And so you go from one URL to another, and you simply go from one application to another. This won't actually help any of these challenges we've had. You'll still have the different inconsistent and incoherent user experiences. And so this isn't really a solution for our team. You could also do it at build time. If you've worked with front-end development, then you're surely familiar with this middle part here. You can simply say in your node dependencies that you depend on specific versions of different apps and package it at build time. But this actually violates one of our core principles, that the teams need to be autonomous and independent. And so if my application lives in a parent application, then I'm dependent on that application being deployed again for my application to be deployed. And so we won't ever reach independent workflows that way. So unfortunately, that's not the way to go either. Now you could do server-side rendering, and that's not an issue. But one of the problems with that is you don't really reach this single spa-like fluid experience serving everything from the server side. You could do something like both, doing it runtime and server side, but we've been looking more at a runtime integration, and so doing it all live. But what does that mean? So one of the things we need to think about is the impact on the different development teams when we do this. And so we didn't start out with micro frontends, we've come to that down the line. And so whatever we do needs to be low impact so that they don't need to spend months implementing whatever solution we come to. And again, they need to still be independent and autonomous. And importantly, the experience needs to be spa-like, fast, fluid. And so there are different alternatives here, of course. Runtime-wise, you could look at something like web components or custom elements or even different frameworks that's been developed for this. We've chosen React for various reasons, and we'll discuss those later. But for now, we can just keep in mind that we've chosen the runtime integration way of doing this. And so what's this? I mean, you can see the different colored squares here on the screen, but we'll focus on the gray one. We'll call that one the app shell. And so what are the responsibilities of this app shell? We're going to look at something called UI composition. We're going to need what different applications are going to be composed together to be able to create a specific view. And also, there are going to be various common concerns that we're going to want to implement once and only once. For example, top navigation, login, logging, and so forth. We're not going to need to implement that for each and every application. There are also going to be various global features. A toaster, for example. We can use the same one again and again instead of having it packaged in every application. There's going to be cleanup sometimes. For example, if we're moving from one view to another, there may be some clutter in the window and global space that we need to remove before moving on. And so that's also a responsibility of this application shell. Communication. And this is actually communication between the app shell and the different child applications. Not necessarily communication between the different micro frontends themselves. We can see this as an extension of the microservices concept. And so when you look at communication, we can use the same sort of principles on how to communicate. And we'll look at this more in depth in a while. So how does a micro frontend get into this app shell? So we'll start looking at this from a more high-end sort of view. So starting out, we can say that an application is this yellow square here. And we're building it, we're spending some time, a few sprints on it, and once we're happy, we can start deploying it. And so we do our various checks, and running our unit tests and so forth, and making sure that it's built correctly. And when it's built correctly, we can put it somewhere. And we're putting it in some kind of storage, and once it's been put into a storage, we can point to its location. And so here we're using a kind of map to point the way to where it's placed. But this is a kind of a high overview of how it works. So let's go a little bit more in depth on how it actually works. So let's say we have version 2 of some application. Still, we're using the yellow square as representative for our application. So once we're done, we're merging a branch into our main line. We're running our CI/CD pipeline, and in our case, we're using Microsoft Azure Pipelines to do this. And once it's done, once it's run all the various checks and whatnot, it's going to generate a package that it's going to put somewhere. And in our case, it's a blob storage. And you can see here above the blob storage that there's a URL representing where it's available in this blob storage. After that, it's going to need to notify our CDN, and we're using Fastly for this. And I've also used, you see this lightning bolt representing Azure functions. It doesn't actually necessarily need to be Azure functions. It only needs to somehow notify Fastly that there's a new version of this application once it's been deployed. So the idea is, if we have a CDN for our different applications, we can, on the fly, direct from one version to another once there's a new version available. And so in the next step, again, we have this yellow square representing version 1 of our application. And when the app shell says, OK, I want you to retrieve this application for me, then it's going to go through Fastly. And if there's a new version and Fastly can toggle between them, we can easily send the new version once it's available. And so Fastly gets version 2 in this blob storage location and sends it back. And before moving on, we can look at the bottom left here. There's a script tag here where it says System.js import map. And so this is the System.js implementation of import maps. This is a new feature available not in all browsers, although in most of them, but using the System.js implementation, it's widely available across all modern browsers, and so that's why we're using that one. It may be the case in a few years that it's a standard implementation, but for now, since it's not, this is what we're going with. And so the most important thing to remember about import maps is that it allows us to retrieve applications from somewhere on the web rather than from node package management during build time. And so this is what enables us to do this during build time. We actually had a more convoluted approach to this a few months back, but we came to the conclusion that we didn't actually need that much complexity in order to get this work. So our initial idea was to update this import map on the fly in the application using Azure App Configuration and even abstractions over WebSockets. But it ended up being much more easy to just abstract this behind Fastly instead. And so that's the approach we're taking right now. So the idea is once we've deployed something from our CI/CD pipeline, we simply need to somehow notify the app shell or at least get the new application that we've deployed, and we're done. So let's look at some of the app shell responsibilities. I've listed them here, but let's look at them one by one. And so again, this is an image of the import map. And it's simply an object representing the different application that's available somewhere on the web. And you see here the first two imports represent our different applications developed by our teams. But you can also see more common dependencies like React, React.DOM, and even a common component library. So let's look at those. If you look at Micro Frontend's material available online, it's often frustratingly brief and vague. It's almost as if there's a lot of people actually haven't been able to do it. So I put in this slide this is actually something that we're actually using. We've switched out a couple of the properties, but this is actual code running. And as you can see, it's very short, it's not complex, it's only a few lines of code making this work. And so I'd like to highlight this line here, which lazily loads an application. And where it imports the name, that name maps to the import map, which then retrieves the application from somewhere on the web, in our case, in the blob storage through Fastly. We can also look at the error boundary and suspense we're using here. It's important to make sure that if there's a kind of error in any of our application, that if they blow up, then we can still use the rest of our application. So let's move on. We're going to need to have a lot of common dependencies. We've chosen to use React in all of our application, and so that means that there are a lot of dependencies that we're going to use over and over again. All of our applications are going to use React, React.DOM, and a few more. But there are also going to be a few common components. For example, we have buttons and components like that are always going to look the same. And again, if we implement those systematically, then we can also change them systematically. And these are marked as external dependencies in our packages. So if we retrieve them once, then we can reuse them through all of our different Micro Frontend applications. So we're using something we call the common component library. Now we're using a button here to illustrate, but there are a vast amount of components available here. And so again, if we import this button, whether it be a Micro Frontend 1 or 2 or wherever, it's going to look the same. Now it could be the case that if we version these, if we update a button, for example, and change its appearance or its behavior, we could use one version in one micro frontend and another in another frontend. And that could be okay. It may not actually need to be super consistent all the time. The backside to that, of course, is you could run into various issues with bugs and so forth, but this actually tends to work pretty well. But of course, it also needs regular effort and sync work between the different teams to make sure that they're all aligned on how these things are supposed to work. It could easily be the case otherwise that a rogue team does something to a component that doesn't align with what everyone else wants to do. And so you need to work on the development communication to make that work. Speaking of communication, more on the technical side, so we need to be able to talk from the app shell to the different micro frontends. And so that might look like this. Let's say, for example, in a micro frontend that we click the login button. We haven't actually implemented the login feature in our micro frontend. That's a feature we want to be able to develop once and be done with it. And so we can send a message to the app shell that can trigger that functionality. So we're using the built-in browser message dispatch to do this. And so here at the top, you can see the micro frontend dispatches an event on window where it says go to login clicked. And then in the app shell, we can subscribe to that event as we please. And you'll notice also that we've used from event here. In this case, we're using RxJS observables to subscribe to this. The advantage to this approach, in other words, is we can use different kinds of libraries in different applications if we want to. We're not all required to use the exact same way of communication. A few approaches that we actually didn't want to go with is, for example, to use the mediator pattern. We could have, from the app shell, injected a mediator observable, for example, that everyone could use, like one channel to communicate with. But that would impose some restrictions that we didn't want to go with. And again, just reminding you that we're just extending the concept of microservices to also include the front end, to have the entire vertical. And so we're using the exact same principles of communicating here, so there's nothing new. And in this case, we're leveraging the browser's messaging functionality to be able to communicate easily. So let's talk a little bit about UI composition. And so we have a CMS where it has different kinds of pages, and editors need to be able to put things together. And so this is what a response might look like. So we have some content, and it's going to compose different applications together. And these applications, in turn, might also have content. And again, these micro frontends map to our import maps. And using those, they're going to get them from the web and put one page together. And so this is what UI composition might look like in a few months. So we have some kind of start page where it just has some kind of link into a major application. And again, we're using these yellow squares to represent our actual application. And so we're coming from some page more public and going into one specific feature. And so the teams representing this yellow square, they don't really need to think about the start page or the offer page here. They only need to think about their actual feature, not necessarily on how it's going to be available on the web. And like you can imagine, there's actually a lot of work making this into a complete whole and a holistic approach that actually works well from the user's perspective, and also to be able for all the teams to understand on how things work together. And so this is one image that our UX teams are working with to be able to see how different flows work together. So this means that this actually isn't only a technical problem, it's also a UX problem, and it's also an organizational problem. So that was a brief overview of the different app shell responsibilities, but we've actually had some forks in the road in terms of the technical approaches that we've taken. So let's look at those. No, yes. So there are a few things that we decided against and a few things that we decided to go for. And so the top left logos here, Pyral, and the blue one is the logo for Single Spa. These are actually frameworks for Micro Frontends. There are numerous downsides to these frameworks. They made it too complicated, too convoluted, and frankly a little bit too hard for our purposes to work with. We didn't need those. And the middle icon is the icon for web components. This is actually a very valid approach. Using web components, you could use any popular framework and be good to go from the different teams. For example, one team might use Angular, but another one could use React, or another one could use jQuery or whatever. It wouldn't actually matter. And there are a number of reasons why we didn't go for this. Number one is it's actually hard to get the package size down a lot. If I need to retrieve Angular and React and various other frameworks, the package size is going to be very big. And again, if we're leveraging that all developers already use React, it's going to be easier to align everyone on their work. Remember, we're using a lot of these, we talk a lot to each other, and so that makes it a little bit easier. I've also crossed over the RxJS logo. And again, we mentioned this briefly during the communication part, but we didn't actually need to enforce RxJS usage and a mediator pipeline kind of approach on all applications, even though this is a popular approach among many implementing micro frontends. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we've crossed over the rocket. So we wanted to do something that wasn't overly complex. We wanted to do something that's fairly simple. And so our image of what we've built is something a little bit more like this tree cottage. It's simple enough, but good enough for what we need. And so our main two pillars on what makes this work are we're using a React-specific approach, and we're using import maps to be able to do this on the fly in the runtime. And we've had a number of challenges, like you might expect, during the months that we've implemented this. And the first one is communication. And I'm not talking about technical communication here. I'm talking about communications between teams, within teams, and between the organization and the development teams, and actually making sure everyone actually agrees on what should be done and in what order. Priorities when implementing after the fact. We didn't start out using micro frontends, and so if we're implementing this after the fact, it's easy to say, oh, we need to finish these features first before we're doing the few things that we need to do to be able to fit into the app shell. And the negative side about that is, of course, the longer you wait to implement everything systematically, the more expensive it's going to be down the line, the more you wait. Testing. If we have various different features aside from each other, each team is going to be responsible for their single thing working using unit tests, integration tests, and application tests. But we're also going to need to make sure all these things work together. And so that can be a little bit difficult to make sure it works correctly if we have different teams where we don't necessarily know what kinds of things that they have that they need to work together in different ways. Alignment in terms of making sure that everyone understands what different parts and how they're going to work together. For example, if we have one login solution, how should it work? Why should it work that way? How should the user flow be? It could be that one team has one version in their minds of how it's going to work, and another team has a completely different view. And so we need to work continuously on that image to make sure that we're all aligned and have the same goal of what the end product is going to be. And so the next point is performance. This is something that we've worked a lot on and that we're going to continue to work a lot on. This is one of the main downsides using the Micro Frontend approach. It's very difficult to make sure to keep up the speed, especially over time. It's very easy for various teams to increase their package sizes over time, and even forgetting to make sure that we don't retrieve our common dependencies more than once. The speed of which the application is sent to the browser and when the user can start using the application is very indicative of how often they're going to stay and use our different features. And so we need to work continuously on that. There's also been some problems keeping the boundaries, and by that I mean it's sometimes difficult to know if a new feature or some functionality is going to be placed in the app shell or in a different team's initiative. And so this will be a little bit more easy if we're using something like domain-driven design, where we may know our bounded context, but that may not always help with some of the more sophisticated technical issues. And this is something we see again and again, that it's not always clear-cut on what belongs where. Surprisingly, explaining the app shell concept is one of the more difficult things that we've had. Although simple in itself, there seems to be something that when introduced after we've had major initiatives, it's a little bit hard to understand what my application, my team's features, what their place is in all of this. But again, communication being one of the most major challenges, you simply need to keep at it, and it'll probably turn out well over time. And we've also had some issues with Conway's law, the law saying that a system is inevitably over time going to reflect on the way the organization's communication is built. It may be the case that we see this as inevitable, but we can actually work on continuously changing both the organization itself and the systems. And hopefully we can make something that is actually a little bit more easy to understand. And so wrapping this up, there are a few prerequisites to be able to make Micro Frontends work. This is something that works well for some kinds of problems and not so well for others. And so the main one is starting out that you have multiple teams developing features for one coherent solution. You are probably going to need a UX team as well to make sure that everything works in a coherent way, not only user experience-wise, but also main features like components and flows and so on. Communication has continuously been one of our major problems, and at this customer it's actually working very well already. And so if you're experiencing bad communications between different teams, then you may need to start working on this before implementing this technical solution. We've had a lot of help having a maturity on the architecture side, both in terms of the technical side, but also continually having a dedicated architecture team between these different development teams, and the architects always talking to each other to make sure everything is aligned. And there's no way you're able to do this without having a DevOps and CI/CD pipelines and automation in place already. It's just not going to work well. And as a friendly reminder, everything we're talking about is various kinds of trade-offs, and so I'm not claiming that this is a silver bullet. It just tends to work very well for some kinds of problems, especially the one that we're at the moment with this customer. And again, closing off, the app shell speed is something that you're going to need to work a lot on and keep working on, and even monitoring to make sure that you're not slowing down over time with all the different teams and various initiatives. So that's it, and I thank you for this time. Any questions?
Thanks for that, Jesper, and welcome back to the studio. As you can see, we have now company from Gustav and Jesper. Jesper, do you all know from the last session, so he won't introduce himself more than that. And Gustav, will you all get to know more on the next session. And we have some questions here that we got at the comments field, and I think we start directly from Björn. Jesper, what's the downside of using the dependency approach if you have good auto tests before deploy?
So the reason we're doing this has nothing to do with using auto deploy. So if we're doing this during build time, which is what this means with the dependencies, the parent application where these micro frontends live needs to be updated for the child application to be deployed. And so we can't be autonomous and independent if we're using that approach. So that's why we can't do that.
Yes, thanks. We continue with the next one from Jens. He asks, will it work in EI6? You know what Jens means with that?
Yeah, so Internet Explorer 6.
I'm sorry.
So it's probably not going to work. I mean, import maps surely don't work. It could be the case that you could manufacture some kind of gigantic polyfill that'll make this work. But on the other hand, for us, we're using modern versions of React. And I mean, you can even forget IE6. So probably no. Although I'm guessing that question is borderline jest, so.
Yes, thanks for the answer and thanks for the question, Jens. And we also have another question here. Does this approach make it trickier to reason about cached versions of different parts of the application? For example, getting version 1 when you were hoping for version 2, or is it more or less likely before?
So I'm guessing this question is about when we went through how this actually works. When you're trying to deploy a micro frontend and the parent application shell needs to be notified about where the new micro frontend is located. And so we had an original approach, which was a little bit more convoluted. And in that case, we updated the application shell's configuration, and then you could see the version directly. But this new approach uses Fastly, a content delivery network, instead. And there's really not much of a difference. The only difference really is where the responsibility lies. So you'll have to look at Fastly, the CDN, instead. One upside with this is it makes it a little bit more explicit for each individual team, since we're working with verticals. So we're doing the database stuff, the backend stuff, the front-end stuff, the pipeline stuff, and also the CDN stuff. So if you can have that in your solution, it'll be pretty explicit of what goes where.
Thanks for that answer.
Jesper, I have a question as well. There's pretty exciting creative stuff there with the design. How do you go about skills development for these? I assume you have product teams, and how do you make sure that these teams have the right skills, and how do you work with that?
That's probably one of the most difficult parts, and actually something that probably needs to be highlighted a little bit more. I mean, it's often very tech-focused, but most of the really difficult stuff is, these soft parts. And I'm not sure I have a really good answer for that, although one thing that I've noticed, especially at this customer, is we've got communication teams where we meet up regularly, like weekly, talking about different issues. It could be bugs or how to solve certain problems, or even developing specific components that affects everybody. And that's probably the best part, working together continuously on different problems. But it's hard. It's very hard.
I noticed that you, Max, and Jesper discussed another thing when we were watching Jesper's session.
I had was basically about how do you maintain sort of centralized architecture control, and how do you delegate autonomy to the different teams? How do you manage that trade-off?
Also a very difficult question. In this case, for this customer, we have a dedicated architecture team, a group of architects that leads all the different teams. So a few architects might lead some of these micro frontend teams, and you'll have a lead architect that kind of sets a goal of where we want to go. And by doing this, we can get kind of a good collaboration between the teams, so no one ever really feels left out, but still get kind of a good cohesion in how we approach things. So having a dedicated architecture team is one way of doing it, and it seems to work pretty well in our case. Although I'm sure there are many more or alternative ways of doing it, but in our case, this works pretty well.
What would be your perspective in terms of a sort of ideal training? Would you strive to have every member of the team have the same skill set, or are you planning some other kind of specialization skill sets?
So it's hard. I mean, ideally, you would want everybody to know the entire part of the vertical stack, you know, back-end, front-end, and database and tests and CI/CD pipelines and even CDN stuff. But it's a little bit much for especially junior developers to be expected to know all that. So you do need probably one or two, I mean, I'm hesitant to call them stars, but someone a little bit more experienced in every team. So you have a kind of a go-to developer. So if you run into a problem, you don't have to feel stuck.
So you have stars and you have stars on the way.
No, that's probably a good way of putting it, but yeah.
All right, thanks.
Although one additional thing, I mean, we do try to help developers as much as possible. So some of the more complicated under the hood stuff is abstracted away in some in different ways, and that's good. Although the downside about that is if something breaks down and hardly anybody knows about it, then it could be hard to know even where to begin looking. So that's always a kind of a trade-off, you know, putting the right amount of abstraction and putting it away somewhere.
Awesome, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I think we continue to our next session, but before we continue with you, Gustav and Mikael from Telia, Max started off on the theme of puns in our introduction. So do you have a favorite pun that you would like to share with us tonight?
Well, I have one, Eric, and that's to remember to skate to where the puck is going. As long as you follow that device, I think you will come along with that.
Okay. Thanks a lot. And now, at least me, and I hope all of you are really looking forward to the next session with Gustav and Mikael. And they will be talking about unlocking the API economy with API Garden at Telia.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this meetup where I, Gustav Eggers, and Michael Nilsson will share our experiences from working with API management at Telia Company. So, who am I? I said it before, my name is Gustav Eggers. I'm a consultant and developer here at Forefront, where I've been working for 9 months. I'm part of the technology division here, and for the last 8 months, I've been at Telia Company and API Garden. Here I work with integrations and exposing of APIs and other services through our API platform. But to start soft, in order to illustrate how we work with APIs on Telia, I would like to illustrate an example here, which I call Project Birthday Cake. Let's put it like this. I have a friend's birthday that is coming up, and I want to surprise this friend with a cake that I made by myself. To achieve that, I need an idea of what cake I would like to bake, obviously. And when that is done, I need some ingredients as well, like oat, sugar, chocolate, for example. Not to mention the cookware I need, like mixers, beater, bowls. Maybe access to some books with some recipes to get some inspiration for my cake. And if I know the exact place to get all this, that would be terrific. In this case, I know of a pantry that contains everything I need. Unluckily for me, there's a locker on it, so I need to unlock the pantry. So I need to get the key, and by asking the owner, I'm given the key to the locker. And because of that, I can unlock the pantry and take advantage of all services behind, in a very flexible and secure way as well. So now I have everything I need to achieve my goal, which is to bake a delicious cake for my friend's birthday. So this is flexible and secure, right? Initially, I have a very clear feeling that most of you are familiar with APIs, and you have probably used one too. An API, an application programming interface, is a set of routines, protocols, and tools for building software and applications. An API specifies how software and application components should talk to each other, on what basis they are allowed to interact with each other. APIs became really useful for software and application development when so-called RESTful APIs appeared. RESTful APIs, also referred to as RESTful Web Services and REST APIs, is based on representational state transfer, which is an architectural style and approach to communications often used in web services development. REST is a way for two computer systems to communicate over HTTP, Hypertransfer Protocol, in a similar way to web browsers and servers. It uses HTTP requests to get, post, and delete data. Based on REST APIs, developers have a standardized and easy way to carry out data and services at a fast and secure way. Because of these protocols between APIs, we know on what basis programs and services can talk to each other. So because of those protocols, we now know that certain things will work, because we have an agreement on that in advance. So that standardization will spare us as developers a lot of trouble. You could actually put it like this. APIs are like what's in between a car's ignition and engine. I don't know how it works, but I know that if I turn the key in the ignition, the engine will turn on. Like these models here, you can see at the image, with the perfect match, it can form this house. But in front of all, if you have the models that you need, it will for sure be the perfect match, given the fact that we have a standardization. One model itself can be pretty useless, perhaps even directly stupid. But together, if you put them into one, they can accomplish some great things. For example, weather applications for different cities. In this sense, with proper API infrastructure and the proper use of APIs in your organization, it will be an enabler of fast, scalable, and secure microservices. This will for sure increase your time to market for software applications, both in long and short term. So if you have a comprehensive solution for this, where you can utilize and implement the usage of APIs in a fast and secure way in your organization, it will unlock the API economy. Having that said, I now leave the word to Michael Nilsson, who is with us from OE.
Hi everyone, my name is Mikael Nilsson and I'm the product owner for API Publishing, which is more or less Telia's API initiative. So we're trying to gather as much as API work as possible into my team. And I also come from an agile background, so I think this has very much to do with being agile and how to help the organization to become more agile. But that's a story for another day. So if we start looking into our team, and the vision for the team is that we believe the future belongs to small independent teams. So independent teams need a really easy and automated way to create and consume services. We provide a platform for building, managing, and sharing APIs, and you're welcome to try it out. So this is the device we try to live after, and yeah, it's been working really good so far. If we look at APIs and the API economy, what is that? I mean, if you look at any YouTube channel or speech or anything, there's billions of value to be made here with the APIs, right? But how should you take part? And the problem is not really just how to take part, but how to make a good business case, and it pretty soon gets tricky. In some cases, you have an easy API where you can expose something, get paid for it. The obvious one for us is messaging. It's rather straightforward to have a machine send a message and someone pays a fixed fee for every message that they send. And that's really easy to do and also easy to explain the business case. But in many cases, the complexity grows pretty fast. If you look at what I call smoothness, which is for me the thing that drives API use. So if you think about any app where you order a taxi or whatever, you often have several parts there. You have a map integration, you have some payment integration, all of these things, and you just press a button on your app and stuff happens. And that's really the smoothness. But that's also the problem with the API economy. It's rather complex. Any one of these services on their own is not really that powerful. But once you combine them, they get really powerful. And once you start combining stuff, then you also have the problem of explaining the business case. Because it's not really straightforward. You're depending on other parts, you depend on other vendors, maybe you depend on something else. And how much is your part worth and how much should go to other vendors with revenue share and stuff like that. But that's what creates the value. And the smoother it is, the more value you provide to your customer. But even there in the smoothness, there's also some things to think about, I think. And then it's like, so you have an API, you can see what your users have been doing. So imagine you're at your computer, you're Googling for a trip to London, you look up that, and then a couple of hours later you're on your phone and you're on Facebook, and suddenly there starts to be all these ads for traveling to London, book your hotel in London, all of that. And then it's like, where is the line? When is it smoothness and when is it too much? When does the user start to feel like you're maybe overstepping this boundary, like the integrity part here for the user? And that's sometimes a tough line to follow, because one user might think it's okay, but another do not think that's okay. So yeah, where is the smoothness boundary? It's something worth thinking of when you're entering into this complex world. So if we look at the typical Telia case, what we see from our customers is that mainly B2B, big B2B customers, you have like a new employee coming. And normally what happens is that, you go to some administrator, you go there and you say, hey, I'm new, I need a phone. They help you ordering a phone. They log into some page and order the phone for you, and a couple of days later, it's arriving. What they really would like to have is API, where this just happens. So when you're added to the AD, you get like, okay, this guy is hired, he's a support engineer. That means he's allowed to select from one of these phones, and he should have a subscription with these services. All of that, he should have it as a device as a service. So you get the new device every 1 or 2nd year or whatever it is. And if it breaks, you can automatically replace it. And all of that can be done then from their own intranet without going to someone talking and always having this discussion. But I would like to upgrade to that, the nicer phone or newer phone. And then it's like all sorted out. And having a phone and all subscriptions, everything just happens. You don't need to think about that anymore. And it's always, getting the right, and you're getting automatically the new versions of the phones when they come out and everything. No more manual work there. It's super easy. And that's kind of a smoothness for our customers. Phones, subscriptions, taken care of. They don't need to do anything with that. So that's a typical Telia case. And what we have seen working with APIs now and trying to focus on that. Last year we've gone from around 3 externals, and then we mean used by customers, so they're not all public. And then a year later we're up to 16 APIs, which we have partners and public users on. So once you focus on it, things starts to happen. And we also see some businesses, and we're talking businesses like billions of revenue every year, where they all transfer into an API economy. The customers, they don't want to use, sending emails and ordering things anymore. They want it as an API. That's like where it's going. So either you're going to be part of that API wave and probably gain even more traffic or business because you're there, or eventually you're going to lose out all of your business, more or less. So how are we thinking around this? Well, our thought is like our solution should be the place to be. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we offer a service, but you select what's best for you. So if you like our service, feel free to use the parts that you like to use, or use half of it, or whatever. What's your need? You decide. And I mean, with this world, it's rather complex. So we know from the start, or we assume at least, that there will be several platforms with almost the same functionality as ours. And depending on what your business looks like, well, use the one that's best for you. So we have planned for a situation where we're going to end up with several options, but we just want to promote, this is the one we are supporting, feel free to use it. And what we then see, that we often go out and present and say like, yes, this is our platform, this is what you can do with it, this is how it works. And then some teams are like, okay, but that's not really, we need this functionality or something that's in another platform. And then we say, okay, cool, set that up. But we really listen to that and try to find our weakness. Why didn't they select us? What's the thing that's really missing? So when the next team comes, we hopefully can offer that. And that's how we see that we're growing as a platform and a team. The part that we haven't seen anyone looking into really is this marketplace or the developer portal. So there we have put a lot of focus, and that's also built with the intention that there will be several platforms. So we can gather APIs from several platforms into our offering, and you say, okay, here's the marketplace, add all your APIs. And that falls pretty good with the API economy, that the more APIs you have, the better it is. And we have not really seen anyone picking that up. So they often have a technology choice, like we need this because of something in the technology stack. But when it comes to the marketing and publishing the APIs, they have nothing preferred, and we really there solve an issue for them. And since we have been building on this, it contains much more functionality than they would get out of the box with any other solution. And we're also thinking of us like an internal SaaS offering. So we compete with other SaaS offerings. We do not compete by saying that we are IT, this is something that's decided that you should use, and that's why you should use us. You should use us because you like our offering, and it should be competitive in the market. And if we look at that on the next slide here, is really interesting to see that you're actually getting more from our service than just the Apigee straight out of the box. So these are functions we have built on top of Apigee to support Telia users. And why is it so important to build more than what Apigee can offer? Mainly two big things, I would say. One is rules. So in a big company like Telia, there's a lot of rules on what you can do, what you're not allowed to do. Logging, for example, you need to log certain things in a certain way to a certain system. Security, you need to follow some security guidelines and all of that. And it's perfectly fine if you want to set that up on your own. But here we are offering that. We have automated that. So if you use our service, your logging is automatically pushed to the right place. You don't need to think about that. Security, we're screening the stuff that you're providing, so you're not breaking any of the basic security rules that's in place. And also we have regulations. GDPR is probably the best example, where there is a huge fine if you break that one. And being in Telia, big turnover as a company, fines will get pretty big. So, well, you don't want to be the one that goes and tell that we broke that, sorry, that was a mistake. So we have automated that as well and made it possible for teams, just use our solution, and we're securing that we're not storing stuff which we're not allowed to do. And we have also looked at firewall solutions, how to get to firewalls. That's always a problem, so we've made a standardized solution there. We're on the roadmap of looking into hybrid solution, where you can also have an on-premise solution, which works really neat together with this SaaS offering as well. Because some use cases, we mainly see two, where you have a latency issue or where you have regulations which dictate that you're not allowed to send data out in the cloud. And then, as you see, we have a lot of other smaller things which we can offer. So I think of it as a SaaS solution and try to build what's valuable to your customers and how can you help them. And yeah, it has turned out really successful for us. So back to Gustav.
Thank you, Michael. So this image you see now, it visualizes what the API economy looks like at Telia and API Garden. This is what we are providing to the world. And here you can find all APIs, public as internal, for external as internal stakeholders. This is why it must be easy and standardized. All APIs at one place for the whole organization to take part of. So the structure here is really important, and it will have a negative impact to have APIs and services spread out. So we will now go a bit more hands-on our API management setup at Telia and API Garden. As Michael described, our strive and mission for API Garden is to assist teams and partners in utilizing APIs. And to implement a cross-functional API strategy, there must be a so-called API manager tool, also referred to as an API gateway for the backend systems. In our case, here at API Garden, that tool is provided by Apigee, and it is called Apigee Edge. In our case, held and hosted in the AWS cloud. Edge is a platform for developing and managing APIs by exposing services with a proxy layer, as described here on the image to the right. It provides an abstraction, an interface, between the developer and the backend services. Rather than letting developers and API consumers reach those services directly, with a lot of security risks at stake, they can access an Edge API proxy that you create. An API product is when APIs are combining their resources to give a certain amount of access for client app data. But the data itself is carried out and exposed by an app. The app is user-specific, credentials are being made for that specific user by a so-called secret and a key, which also helps the providers to keep track of who's using the services. To use a specific app, you need a secret and a key to be approved as a receiver of a so-called access token, which allows you to call and receive data from an actual API. API Edge could best be described as a shield with openings into all information you need and to the digital services behind. Before this API manager mindset, you would probably need to create some sort of client server or tunnels to specific systems within Telia. Now you can reduce that bottleneck and instead carry out the same thing but on a much more secure, available and flexible way. So this is what Apigee brought, a new way of thinking regarding API management. This is a very smooth and easy managed process that simplifies for developers taking part in backend services and data at a fast, flexible and least of all secure way. From a business approach, there are some questions you would like to answer with your API strategy. How is your API traffic trending over time? Who are your top developers? Are you attracting more developers? With support features, life gets a lot more easy. And with Apigee, it comes advantages like design functions, security functions, easier to scale, monitor, and based on that you can analyze and monetize. So, what you see here is the holistic overview of our platform and way of thinking, a skeleton over API Garden itself. We have an API proxy, which is the API manager that I just described, Apigee. We have a firewall that is protecting the API backend services. And there are two ways to enter this API manager, either directly through our URL or through our developer portal, which you can find below of the API proxy. So, this is one of the typical use cases at API Garden. You see here in this flow, to the left there is a user that signs up to the portal. New user is created to Apigee, which is our API manager, and a secret is provided to that user in return. Then this developer creates a new application and API key are requested. And this request email is forwarded to service responsible about the need to access that API. If you're lucky, that request is accepted. API key is provided to the developer and the developer can now access the API. Then the application makes an API call. Apigee Edge authenticates and authorizes the user, handles the needed transformations and forwards the call to level 1 proxy. Routes the call to the correct backend system, and then the response is given, response is forwarded to Apigee. Apigee transforms and catches the response, and the response is returned to the application. And it will now follow a short demo when demonstrating this example through Postman, which is an API collaboration tool. So, what you see here is the Postman GUI. I need to authorize before being allowed to make my call towards this API, which is the Global Address Management API. So I start by going into the API manager, which is Apigee, where I need the key and the secret to this API. I start with copying the key here, which is the username. And what is very important to remember is that this type of authorization is basic auth. I go into here, I also get the secret, and then I post it in the password. It's also important to make sure that the URL is correct, target URL. Then I send my response. And this went fine, as you can see, 200 OK. Here is my access token. This is what I'm capable of receiving when I have the key and the secret. But to make the actual call towards the API, I need an access token. And now I want to get data. So I go to get address Sweden in this case. I have my bearer token. So this I will copy here. Once copied, URL target is in order. I send my request. And now I have generated the data I need from the address management API, which is Storgatan in Solna. So that was the short demo, and that was also our API manager tool. Apart from an API manager tool, we need a marketplace, a gathering point where we can communicate between publishers of APIs, users of APIs, and teams. Partners and developers need to be able to share experiences, services, documentation, and not to mention APIs with the community. Based on that concept, and as a natural component of our ecosystem, we have the developer portal. The developer portal is the self-service API marketplace, which has an essential role in our way of working with APIs at Telia. It is the hub where you as a developer or partner are working with Telia. And for us as owners and developers of the platform, it comes with obligations and requirements to maximize that partnership. One of the fundamentals of succeeding with API management is to be aware of the developer experience. It doesn't matter who you are as a business. Your company's APIs are useless if there's nobody there to use them. Tutorials, how-to articles, and a common pedagogical flow is a must-have. What also needs to be in the portal is some relevant documentation. The portal is based on a catalog mindset. RESTful APIs are documented in so-called Swagger specifications. The Swagger specification defines a set of files required to describe an API. For example, what backend does the call go towards, what operation it supports, and also what API parameters there are and what they return. If there's need for authorization, and also things like who owns the service, of course, and how you can reach them. But there are also other key factors in what makes a developer portal successful, and it's not only about the API documentation. The best portals should provide a self-service experience, which is the general concept we have here at API Garden. Of course, with the support and proper onboarding from the core team, which is something that we take very seriously, of course. By providing permission-based self-service sub-portal, so to say portals within the portal, developer partners and other relevant stakeholders can own their own environment where they can edit, share, advertise their own APIs for customers as well as others at a flexible, secure, and scalable way. This will both lead to increased deliveries of high-quality applications and increased speed to market. What is important to remember, though, is that third-party APIs can hurt your business just as much as failures in your own APIs. So it's really important that there is a secured way of getting access, both as producer as well as consumer. It is also really useful if there are tools that can help users monitor API traffic, and this can be carried out in a developer portal as well. This is a really effective way of keeping track of API usage, which translates monetization, which is a way of participating in revenue sharing with the API providers, which is basically one of the core reasons a company wants to have an API management strategy, to take part of the digital economy. The portal also has a very important feedback mechanism. As part of being the middle hand here at Telia, working with APIs, there are sometimes challenges in knowing what the users want. So a very important feature is to gather their feedback through blogs, customer support blogs, forums for discussions, community contributing content, for instance. Here are some of the business-to-business APIs that we provide. We have the Active Directory Integration Service, which is there to manage B2B clients, employees, for authorization and authentication when ordering new services. Mobile subscriptions, it is a service to order and manage mobile subscriptions. Device leasing, that service is there to help to lease devices such as mobiles, infopads, computers, etc. And we have the Address Management API. So, some key takeaways. We come across them before, but the main reason for participating in the digital economy and to have an API strategy is, of course, in front of all the value. It drives revenue by automating and smoothing services, which in its case also will reduce time to market. It will reduce delivery times by reusing ready-made services that are already there. You don't have to start from scratch. It will also reduce cost by structuring service governance. This whole standardization we mentioned. Security, of course, one of the most important key takeaways. Access control is managed by API Garden for secure services that is being easy to use. And of course, the scalability. Telia's API's architecture is designed with future scalability and extendability in mind. How and where to start? As Michael described as well, it's really important to embrace the change and select the best platform for you. That can, for example, start with choosing the right API manager. In our case, this API manager is Apigee, but it can depend on your situation, what manager that suits you. Develop for reusability. Once again, then we don't have to start from scratch. We can reuse services that are already there, and this will save and reduce development costs. Build up an intuitive developer portal is key for ease of use. You need this marketplace and gathering point where you can share experiences. And of course, engaging with business stakeholders drives visionary product development. And that might be the core reason of participating in the API economy. Having that said, we thank you for participating, and we are now ready to answer questions.
Welcome back, and thanks for that talk, Gustav and Mikael. I think we just jump right into the questions. We got several of them. For the panel, how do API gateways interact with micro frontends? Would you interact between verticals using an API gateway?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say there's, much of a difference at all. If you're doing micro frontends, it doesn't really affect on your choice on API gateways. So the only thing you're doing is adding the front-end layer to the entire vertical, as well as, of course, the edge layer as well. So one complication or a challenge could be if you're adding the edge layer to each and every micro front-end, there could be an issue trying to figure out what happens. For example, if I've got 3 micro front-ends on one page in one application shell, and they all have their own configuration of what happens at the edge, and the application shell also has that configuration, then you could potentially have, in this example, 4 different ways of what could happen with the different network calls. So, it could be a little bit difficult trying to figuring out how that works in its whole, but all in all, it doesn't affect the choice much.
Yes, thanks. And another question here from Gabriel. I think it's addressed to you, Gustav. Were you successful in implementing self-service both within the organization and outside?
Yeah, we came across that in the presentation as well. What is really important and what is one of the key features in the developer portal, for instance, that's the feedback mechanism. Since we are implementing this new way of thinking around APIs, it's really important to hear what the users actually want and need. That's one of the, as much as a fun challenge, of course, for us as API Garden to figure out that, because we don't always know that either. That's why it's so important to take part of what the users want and so on. But in our case, it's proven to work really good, actually. With a proper onboarding session, which is really important, of course, to the platform, make sure how it works, our way of thinking, and how we can assist them, because that differs as well, of course. But in our case, it's been working really fine, actually. Okay. And it's also up to us to have a lot of, we're talking about this catalog mindset, to have the tutorials, how to articles, and so on. And we're always there to give our support as well. So it's been working good. And the whole point of this is so that team can own their own content, edit the way they want, consume what they want, and so on. So it's been working really good.
Yeah. Thanks.
Can I ask a question, Eric?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I was just thinking, like you said before, skate to where the puck is going,
yeah,
right? You have this pantry full of good ingredients and you're baking magical cakes. Do you envision anywhere this sort of metaphor will take you, and what could happen in the future? Because you're already driving revenue, you have management buy-in, you're designing in a wise way. Where can this go, do you think?
Well, first of all, we have to continue what we're doing now, which is actually to give this, enable this way of working for the whole organization. But that's been working really good this far. If we can spread our message about reusability and that this way of working actually will increase speed to market, it in both short and long term also increase revenue. I think that it's really up to us to use this platform now to actually spread the message. But when that is done, one example is that our developer portal has been, we have doubled the amount of users only this year. So the message is out there, and we hope it will continue to grow. But as we also said in the presentation, we have some really good B2B services out there, which really makes life easier for our customers as well. And we just want to continue that way. And
awesome. Those APIs are going to be in everything eventually.
That's the whole idea. Yeah. I mean, we're having our team mission with the idea that the future belongs to independent teams. In terms of that, things need to be automated and easy. And of course, this whole governance. I mean, we don't want those blockers that is there today, of course. So that's actually we were talking about speed to market and so on. That's something that will increase that opportunity for sure.
I actually have another question. Like, besides PowerPoint presentations and recording videos and going to meetups, what's been the most fun so far with this consultancy work you've been doing?
But at API Garden, I think it's the whole. It really gives room for innovation in terms of that we're not always certain what the users need and want. That's kind of up to us to build the features we think they need, and this whole feedback mechanism. That's an indicator whether we are doing the right things or not. And I really like that because that's a really fun interaction with the developer teams, especially. And I mean that's been the most fun part this far.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
Yeah,
API-driven cake baking.
Absolutely so. There are some delicious cakes in the oven.
Yes. Great. I actually have a question for you, Jesper. How did you? I noticed from your presentation that you have chosen Fastly at your current project. How come that you chose Fastly? Because I noticed that you are running on Azure.
So we're running on Azure, yeah. And at the beginning of this, you could call it a renewal project of all the services that we're doing. We basically started out with, okay, we're going to go with API management in Azure. Since it's, it is a very good solution, and it's become almost this de facto go-to solution. But everything comes with a trade-off, and so we were already using Fastly for a few things, but in the end, the features that we were interested in ended up being available there and making the whole thing just a lot easier and also cheaper. So it's not much more difficult than that. Yes. So it's a trade-off solution, you could say.
Perfect. Thank you. Any of you guys have any more questions for Gustav on the?
No, I could say something about the next speaker.
Yes. So I can, before we go into the next session, I see here at the comments field that Michael is very busy answering all the questions, and great to have you with us, Michael. Yes, next session. Go ahead, Max.
I think this is going to be a very interesting technical session about some best practices using React as a front-end framework. And just like to add some of the business value in this case. It's a bank. They're doing savings and loans. And this front-end application is meant as a digital banking experience to generate savings primarily to begin with. And it's been incredibly successful in achieving that business objective. So that's just something I would like to add to the coming session, so we understand that it's a bunch of effective technology, but it also achieves a business goal.
Yes, and I will also. I can introduce the next session then. It will be Amar and Oscar who will share their experience from launching a banking application within 6 months. But I think this session will be the slides will be in English, but the session will be in Swedish, just so you know that. But before we start, we take off with Amar and Oscar. Would you like to send them any greetings with your favorite pun, Jesper?
I mean, I'm fresh out of puns, but Max seems to be loaded with them. So.
The pun machine. I need to work up on some puns for the last panel session here.
Okay.
So we'll finish off.
Yeah, don't miss the last session.
So don't what we do in life echoes in eternity.
Exactly. Thank you. And but I think it's time for Oscar and Amar.
Hej och välkomna. Mitt namn är Amar.
Jag är Oskar.
Vi är fullstack-utvecklare med passion för Frontend. Vi båda har jobbat i Forefront sedan 2019 och kommer idag att presentera case för en bank. Vi börjar med att se två bilder här. Den vänstra bilden presenterar hur en bank fungerade förr i tiden. Och den högra bilden presenterar hur en digital bank fungerar. Tiden mellan de här två bilderna kan uppfattas lång. Men med hjälp av dagens teknik så kan man ta det här steget väldigt snabbt. Secure Frontend from requirement to release. Vi har identifierat att banken behövde en plattform för att tillåta kunder att skapa sparkonto och kunna ansöka för lån. Och som bank så är det alltid extra viktigt att ha säkerhet, tillgänglighet och integritet i de applikationer som man har. Projektet behövde gå från krav till release inom 6 månader. Så hur gjorde vi det? Tidigare så har vi identifierat några problem som banken hade. Bland annat så hade banken olika leverantörer för frontend och backend. Och detta var problematiskt eftersom att kommunikationen mellan de här två teamen funkade inte jättebra. Det var väldigt stor brist i kommunikation. Och som kan vi se i den vänstra bilden så frontend och backend jobbade mot olika mål och hade olika krav. En vanlig bild av hur ett team ska fungera är ju den högra, där vi ser att frontend och backend kompletterar varandra och de går mot ett gemensamt mål. En annan stor grej som existerade, eller stort problem, är ju att det saknades en viktig roll och det är en produktägare som driver fram lösningen. Därför vi har identifierat 6 olika steg för säker applikation som vi kommer gå igenom lite tidigare. Det första är ju arkitekturen. Och med det menar vi hur vi har byggt våra applikationer och vilken säkerhet vi har integrerat i applikationerna för att skydda den viktiga datan. Vi behöver inte uppfinna hjulet ibland, för den redan finns. Så vi använder även redan tillgängliga säkerhetskoncept. Vi använder oss av React TypeScript som en single page application. Och sen vi kommer se hur vi använder state och datahantering. Vi kommer även kolla på hantering av npm dependencies och tredjepart resurser. Och sist kommer vi kolla hur vi integrerade continuous integration, continuous delivery i vår lösning.
Precis som Amar nämnde då, så tänkte vi gå in på lite på djupet i de här punkterna också. Och det först tänkte vi börja med att kolla lite på arkitekturen för hur vår frontend-app såg ut. Eller för snarare hur integrationerna ser ut. För vad är väl en frontend-app nu för tiden utan integrationer? Det går väl att bygga lite statiska hemsidor som inte innehåller så mycket data, men det är ofta inte så fallet är. Speciellt inte då för en bankportal som i det här fallet, där olika användare ska komma åt sina konton och det är väldigt viktigt att ingen annan kommer åt de här kontona. Rimligt kanske. I alla fall, OAuth2-arkitekturen är en standard för hur man delger rättigheter till användare nu i frontend-applikationer. Som bilden visar här så kan vi se i steg 1 att att de splittar på resursserver och autentiseringsserver. De här ligger fortfarande under samma säkerhetsdomän för att underlätta lite kommunikation. Men det här steget gör man ofta i princip för att enabla single sign-on så att man ska kunna logga in och autentisera sig på olika appar utan att behöva logga in separat på dem allihopa. Så då delger resursservern autentiseringsansvaret till autentiseringsservern. Så när en klient går in på hemsidan och ska identifiera sig, eller ska komma åt en resurser, så måste man först identifiera sig mot autentiseringsservern. Då skapar den här autentiseringsservern en nyckel som den ger tillbaka till klienten. Den här nyckeln kan då klienten använda för att komma åt just de resurser som den användaren ska komma åt. Det här är en simpel princip. Identifiera dig, få nyckel, hämta dina resurser. Men det finns såklart fallgropar och problem för att få all funktionalitet på plats som man vill. Och för att få de krav som är ställda att få verka. Till exempel så i vårt fall så har vi implementerat en autentiseringsserver med hjälp av Keycloak som har öppen källkod. Som är väldigt lätt att sätta upp. Men såklart när du ska börja anpassa efter dina egna behov lite så blir det alltid lite mer problematiskt. Hur som helst, en av de fallgrupper du till exempel gick in i är att eftersom du sätter resursservern bakom lås så måste då autentiseringsservern också vara autentiserad för att kunna bygga upp de här nycklarna som innehåller lite personlig data. Den här typen av problem skapades lite, men inga större, ganska smärtfria lösningar, men såklart tar lite tid och behöver lite eftertänksamhet för att lösa dem. Ett annat exempel på vad vi gjorde här var att vi slog in hela vår React-app i autentiseringschecken. Så att för att komma åt webbsidan överhuvudtaget så var man tvungen att identifiera sig först. Vilket var väldigt lätt att integrera mot Keycloak i det här fallet då, eftersom du inte behövde separera någon kod kort och gott, utan du bara slå in alltihopa i identifieringen. Som Ammar också nämnde så är det väldigt dumt att uppfinna hjulet igen. Vi har använt oss av dem som jag skulle säga att en måste för att skapa en säker bankapplikation just nu. Jag pratade om den här nyckeln som autentiseringsservern ger ut. Den består av ett JWT som är JSON Web Token som egentligen är en krypterad sträng som innehåller lite data, lite utgångstider och så vidare för att du inte ska ha länge som helst. Och så som det funkar är att när du identifierar dig mot din autentiseringsserver så får du ett refresh token och ett access token. Ett av de här är långlivat och ett av de är kortlivat. Access token är ett kortlivat. Men det är sedan access tokenet du använder för att faktiskt komma åt dina egna resurser, för det är det som är det viktiga. Men eftersom det här är kortlivat så kan vi då också använda vårt refresh token för att uppdatera utgångstiden på vårt access token. Det här hjälper till att skydda mot ifall någon av någon anledning skulle få tag i ditt access token så har de bara en viss kort tidsperiod på sig att kunna utnyttja det. Vi har också, som så många andra i Sverige, använt BankID för identifiering. Det skapar om inte bara säkerhet så skapar det också en väldig trygghet hos kunder. Det ger ett förtroende för kunderna att den app du använder faktiskt är säker. Och det är också väldigt säkert. Det är väl lite utdaterat att kanske använda username password på en bankapplikation. Det känns lite sådär om man måste logga in och göra överföringar med det. En tredje självklarhet är att kryptera trafiken. Slå på HTTPS för all trafik. Viktigt att poängtera är också att det ofta man tänker på är att du ska ha HTTPS när du använder, eller för att komma åt dina egna resurser. Men glöm inte då heller bort att man ska använda det när man hämtar bilder och liknande för att skydda mot man-in-the-middle-attacker. Så att ingen snappar upp dina anrop och skickar den vidare utan att du märker det. Att ha de här certifikaten som HTTPS använder då, är en liten kostnadsfråga också. De måste vara signerade av en auktoritet för att de ska bli betrodda av din webbläsare. Så det vi har gjort på det här uppdraget då, är att vi har skapat ett självsignerat certifikat för all intern kommunikation medan den externa kommunikationen är köpt och auktoriserad. För att få det lilla fina gröna nyckellåset uppe på användarnas webbläsare. Den fjärde grejen här då är en brandvägg eller en WAF som också kallas en Web Application Firewall. Den hjälper till framförallt att skydda extremt mycket mot DOS-attacker och liknande som kanske inte koden i sig kan skydda så mycket mot. Men även om det inte är säkerhetsbrist så är det väldigt viktigt att man inte kan dosa ner en autentiseringsserver, för då sätter man hela banken i schack, kort och gott.
Och nästa punkt här är ju det som vi använder som ramverk. Det är React och vi använder specifikt TypeScript. När en JavaScript-programmerare använder TypeScript för första gången så kan det uppfattas som extra arbete som kanske är onödigt. Men med tiden så kommer man upptäcka hur den faktiskt förenklar koden. Genom att den gör den enklare till att testa, debugga och läsa. React är säker eller secure by design. Och det som menas med detta är att React hjälper oss med några sårbarhet. Till exempel som cross-site scripting och injections. React använder sig av ESX eller TSX i det här fallet. Och om vi ser på den under bilden så kan vi se även eventhantering med vanlig HTML skedde som vanlig string. Medan i ESX så läser man detta som funktion, vilket gör att vi begränsar injections möjligheten för en användare. En viktig grej här är att aldrig leta på användaren. Att alltid validera in data och ut data. I en av applikationerna som vi byggde så kunde användaren ladda upp kompletterande filer som skulle hanteras av en handläggare på banken. Detta är riskfullt eftersom användaren kan ladda upp skadlig skript. Och detta skulle kosta väldigt mycket ifall det skulle bli en attack. Därför vi har bestämt oss för att begränsa format på filerna som man kan ladda upp till PNG, JPG och PDF från frontend-hållet. Vi har även begränsat, eller vi har konverterat alla de här till en säker format när det kommer till backend innan vi hanterar datan. Vi har begränsat även kundens möjligheter genom att hjälpa kunden. Och här menar vi när vi har ett fält där skulle kunden fylla upp med siffror så har vi begränsat endast in data till siffror och inga andra tecken. När det kommer till datahantering så har vi använt oss av Redux som vi ser på bilden. Fördelen med Redux är att vi har all data sparat och lagrat på samma ställe. Och det vi utnyttjar det här även att vi använder session storage till att spara datan, vilket innebär att när en session avslutas så finns inte datan kvar. Vi tar bort hela datan. Och då har inte någon möjlighet att komma åt datan när kunden är klar med sin session. Vi använder även cookies för kommunikation mellan olika apparna. Och vi gör exakt på samma sätt här, att när en session upphör så tar bort vi alla cookies.
Utöver de här andra problemen som en frontend-app behöver hanteras med idag så bygger nästan alla nya frontend-ramverk på någon sorts dependencies och tredjepartsbibliotek. NPM, Node är det som React bygger på och det finns, vad man kallar för. Det är ett världskänt träsk av mycket subdependencies och extremt stora paket som kan komma med i en applikation som du faktiskt inte själv har kontroll över. Så lite av det mottot vi har jobbat efter är att ju mindre dependency du har, desto mer kontroll kommer du ha över din egen applikation. Inom flera avseenden. Dels säkerhet, tar du någonting som väldigt få människor använder har du faktiskt ingen aning om vad det är. Det kanske ser ut att funka i stunden men gör inte det. Du har heller ingen aning om hur mycket de underhålles, kort och gott. Men hur som helst, så vi har för de små funktioner som man inte känner att man behöver uppfinna hjulet igen så har vi faktiskt sett till att bygga de egna applikationerna, eller bygga de egna funktionerna. Vi har också sagt upp ett komponentbibliotek då vi har lite små olika frontends här och det är inte bara en portal. Så har vi försökt bryta ut affärslogiken i till själva React-apparna och satt upp ett helt stateless komponentbibliotek. Till exempel hur alla knappar ser ut och headers och footers och liknande. Vilket underlättar all nyutveckling sen och det är lättare att separera den kod som är känslig in i varje app i sig. Det är inte bara bibliotek och funktionalitet man använder också, utan man kanske, vi i vårt fall har vi inte faktiskt gjort det, men hämta bilder från 3D-resurser och sånt där. Ifall du inte själv står för källan till de här bilderna så är det väldigt viktigt att verifiera att de är vad de är i framtiden också. Det kan man göra i React till exempel genom att genom att sätta en hash på den bild du till exempel hämtar. Det här hashvärdet kommer ändras ifall någon har modifierat datan, och ifall du då försöker hämta ner en bild som har modifierats så kommer du inte att acceptera det här. Vilket det gör att du på sätt och vis kontrollerar att ingen ändrar dina 3D-resurser. Men sagt, samma princip som innan, att använda så lite som resurser kan. Ska du utveckla en bankapplikation så behöver du förmodligen inte använda så mycket tredjepartsresurser. NPM Audit som jag skrivit här då. NPM står ju för då Node Package Manager som hanterar alla de här dependenserna inom frontend-verken. Har en funktionalitet som heter Audit. Den här skannar igenom alla de dependencies du har specat upp för att se ifall det finns några säkerhetsbrister här i. Den här funktionen kan man skatta lite åt också. Ifall man inte håller koll på vad som händer där så kan det lätt komma upp i tusentals säkerhetsbrister eftersom den här skannar också alla subdependencies, och eftersom allting går runt ett kretslopp lite i NPM så kan det snabbt balla ur. Men värdet av att använda verktyget är enormt så länge man ser till att hålla koll på det från början. Så som NPM funkar då är att eftersom det är fritt för alla användare så kan också alla användare rapportera in säkerhetsbrister. När de gör det så har ägaren till paketen en viss tid på sig att reparera de här för att inte de här varningarna ska börja ske. Så att det finns heller ingen garanti på att paket använt tidigare är lovat att vara säkert i framtiden. Så att det gäller att underhålla applikationen och därför också kanske välja större paket, större dependencies som underhålls faktiskt. Så att de här säkerhetsbristerna försvinner om det skulle dyka upp. Den här bilden känner säkert igen. Vilken process nu för tiden vill inte ha en automatisk pipeline med continuous integration och continuous delivery. Det här underlättar, det har inga säkerhetsfördelar direkt, men det implicit så skapar det sådana också. Och att releasa och ha en automatisk process i bankvärlden är väl ganska nytt eftersom att det oftast krävs långa testperioder för att släppa ut nya versioner av appar. Här vill man såklart komma ifrån för att följa de nya teknikerna och kunna deploya på veckobasis kort gott. I alla fall, vi har också satt upp en pipeline här då, med hjälp av Atlassian i den stack vi har använt. Så att vi har använt Bitbucket för repon och vi har använt Bamboo för bygg- och deployjobb med en egen byggserver. Men kort och gott, om vi följer stegen då, så är det ju utveckling enligt Gitflow. Vi kör code review, inte att underskatta steget. Folk tar det ofta lätt på, men att göra det ordentligt skapar ju dels en insikt i andras kod och som man lättare kan hoppa in där och utveckla själv. Men också bara att rensa bort skräp eller säkerhetsbrister kort och gott. Här kommer också upp då till byggprocessen. Vi har kört tester med Jest i React i frontenden. Vi kör en style check så att koden ser enhetlig ut i alla appar och inte finns sagt skräp och allting är rätt formaterat. Vi kör också NPM Audit. Som jag sa en tidigare slide att det kan såklart finnas säkerhetsbrister kvar, det är inte helt garanterat. Men att köra det i byggsteget så kan vi i alla fall ha kontroll över vilka som kommer in och inte. Att ha kontroll med det menar att man kan whitelista paket så vi vet att det finns en minimal säkerhetsbrist i det här paketet. Då kan vi acceptera den. Men om man inte har det här i byggsteget så kan det bara flöda på sådana här utan att man märker av det. Sen är det också då själva bygget i sig där vi använder Reacts egna optimering så att de paketerar ihop den här webbappen till en enkel HTML-fil, en index HTML-fil som är optimerad och minimal för det syfte den ska uppfylla. Helt icke-manuellt klarar vi inte av att göra det här så att vi har fortfarande lite acceptanstester. Man vill såklart bygga det här så mycket automatiserat man kan med integrationstester och det. Men det har inte lagt fokus på det just nu, så att vi har fortfarande ett manuellt teststeg här som de verifierar de byggreleaser vi gör. Den här går sedan ut i en release och deploy för produktionsmiljö när den är acceptanstestad. Då. Värt att poängtera också är att vi ser till att det är ett och samma bygge för både test och produktionsmiljö. Så att inte det blir oklarheter i vad som faktiskt testas och vad som kommer ut i produktion sen. Är det ett och samma bygge så är det en och samma artefakt genom hela pipelinen, vilket skapar en betryggelse i vad man deployar och inte. Också väldigt lätt att rollbacka då, eftersom man har koll på de här releaserna. Så att använda en sån här artefakt genom hela pipelinen då skapar ju en fråga kring lite konfiguration per olika miljöer också. Det här har vi sett till att göra i deploy-steget då, så trots att vi har samma artefakt så kan vi också deploya lite olika konfigurationer. Där har vi utnyttjat lite funktioner i Bamboo också för att göra det. Till exempel att vi inte ska gå mot våra API-endpoints i testmiljö när vi är i produktion, utan då ska vi gå mot äkta miljöer. Men vi vill inte heller ha de här hårdkodade i koden såklart, för att då kommer de här URL:erna och det läcka ut också. Och lite känslig data som man kanske inte vill att en end-user ska kunna få tillgång till om de vet hur man använder en inspect-terminal i Google Chrome till exempel. Men en fullt fungerande pipeline kort och gott med vissa manuella steg då, men som ändå gör att vi kan deploya på en veckobasis ifall det behövs inom banken. Har varit väldigt uppskattat. Det var ju de 6 stegen egentligen då, som vi tycker att en frontend-app bör tänka på när utvecklar det här för att få till en säker frontend helt enkelt. Och de 4 viktigaste poängerna vi har tagit med oss då egentligen är att kunskap om den här arkitekturen och hur säkerhetstänket sker från början är extremt viktigt. Att både frontend-parten och backend-parterna, som jag nämnde i början också, att de jobbar tillsammans bidrar till en enorm flexibilitet och kvalitet. Så att man vet vad den här nyckeln kommer innehålla, man vet hur man ska använda den, man vet varför man inte kan göra det här. Det sparar enormt tid i debuggningen. Såklart kräver också att man har kompetenser och att folk förstår båda bitarna, men man behöver inte ha så djup förståelse utan bara den ytliga förståelsen. Är guld värt och sagt, det går 5 gånger effektivare än om man själv ska sitta och hålla på med problem som man inte förstår varför de finns. 3:e punkten är ju att man ska inte hasta in på lösningar. Tänk igenom det du gör kort och gott. För att nämna den här OAuth-arkitekturen till exempel, så hoppar du över ett steg så har ju hela idén fallerat. Du kan inte implementera en sån här grej halvt, utan kort och gott som det låter, gör enkelt men gör rätt. Det 4:e punkten också är att vi har märkt hur mycket det ger att faktiskt hålla de här dependencerna och tecken up to date. För gör det så får du så mycket support från de här produkterna i sig att du inte behöver implementera så mycket specifik säkerhet. Som man nämnde förut där med cross-site scripting och liknande. Det kommer gratis så länge du inte aktivt gör något fel kort och gott. Men det kommer också gratis med tanke på att det fortfarande underhålls. Så fort du börjar gå in på gammal teknik så kan det skita sig.
Nu kan vi summera. Applikationen blev klar i tid och hade stor påverkan på kundens verksamhet. Att använda mycket av den senaste tecken underlättar arbetet. Men det krävs lite jobb för att fortsätta hålla den up to date. Applikationen är ett MVP som kommer att vidareutvecklas. Men nu är den lätt att underhålla med liten risk för nya säkerhetsbrister. Och vi kan nämna här även att pentesterna klarades utan något fel.
Tack för oss.
Tack.
Thanks for that, Amar and Oscar, and great to hear about your success story with the banking application. We jump right into the questions. We don't have Amar and Oscar with us, but I know that Max, you have a more, wide front-end question and to Jesper.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Jesper. You were involved a little bit in terms of, training, coaching, in terms of security design here. Do you have any general thoughts on how to approach ensuring good security in front-end applications?
I think a lot of the times it may seem a little bit more difficult than it is because you don't really think about what's happening. And so if you have, the way I see it from the high perspective is you have a user that gets an application into a browser and some stuff happens. You know, you log in, you get a kind of a token, and there's a bunch of networks calls happening, and you go back and forth, and you're interacting with different backend services and so forth. And so you need to know what's actually happening, like what interaction happens between different parts. If you know that, it can be a little bit more easy to understand what you need to focus on. And then, of course, you also need to know about like what are the common pitfalls that you have. And so, you know, using the OWASP top 10, for example, if you can cover that, then you've come a really long way. And also, like they were talking about, using automated tools to find things that you might have missed otherwise.
And what about, is there any way to approach monitoring, you think, around, is that a security aspect or?
Monitoring is probably the most important aspect that's often overlooked. Like people don't really think about it. For example, like say you're attacked by a bunch of different hackers or whomever, and you never see it because you don't monitor it. How are you going to react to that? I mean, you can't do it. So you need to monitor everything in terms of, you know, networks, calls, and performance, bugs. I mean, everything.
Thanks.
Great. I also have a question. Oskar and Amar talked about that they choose Redux for state management. If you don't choose Redux for state management, could you go with any other approach?
I mean, you could use any state management. That is technically an implementation detail. Redux is the de facto standard for React applications. And for good reason, because it's based on the event sourcing concepts of, you know, you have a stream of events over time. And you can use that to your advantage during both development time, but also during runtime. For example, if you have a stream of events that the user has done over time, like the user clicked that thing and then this happened and so forth. If you can build your application state based on all the things that happened, then if there's ever a bug, if you send that to your logging tools, a developer can just say, oh, run this user's input for me, and I can get the exact same state that the user had on my local machine, which is normally a very difficult thing to achieve. So that's one of the side advantages in a mature application that you can get. And of course, then, I mean, it's much easier for development in terms of testing and so forth, but that's one of the more, perhaps a little bit more unknown advantages, I guess you could say.
Thanks. Do you guys have any other questions for Jasper, who is our front-end guru here in the studio? Or with that, I think it's. I think before we end, I would just like to say a great thanks to all the speakers and all the customers that have joined us here tonight, and of course all you guys that have been watching us. Thanks a lot for that. Is there anyone in the panel that would like a shout out to the?
I was asked to do a pun. I don't know about the pun, but I just thought of one, which is, how do you reduce response times in front-end? You pay with cash. But okay, but anyway, I enjoyed apart from the jokes, I enjoyed the evening. It was a lot of fun and very good content from you guys. Thank you very much for that. And thanks to our customers who let us speak about these cases. Thank you very much. And yeah, that's about it from me.
Yes. Thanks again, and we will be back after the summer vacation with new meetups, so look out at meetup.com for upcoming events, and until then, have a great summer and stay safe, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.